Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 177 of the Peak of Serenity podcast. I am, as always, one of your hosts, emallson, and joining me, we have my co-host, Namali.
Hello.
And this week, we have a patch 10.2 release date. It is
Heck
coming out
yeah.
right after BlizzCon, and the
The
raid
Tuesday after.
yeah, and the raid comes out the week after that. And that means also we have a release candidate. We have a bunch of stuff getting finalized. We had what is probably our final round of raid testing, and we got some more loot updates. So we got actually quite a bit of stuff to go through. That's just like news from the past week that impacts like week one of raiding more than anything
Yeah.
else. So yeah, before we get into that, how was your raid week, Anam?
Uneventful as always. We did get a new Rashox, but I think we are just in that. I'll say my rate at least is having a little bit of burnout. So we basically have started to like. I think one of our shaman healer was like, I literally don't want to log in and raid this week. I was like, that's fine. Like, just take it off. We have enough healers to cover whatever. But yeah, we're sort of in that. I think this was before the announcement, but we're in that sort of area of like this patch is getting. It's weird to say this, but this patch is getting a little long, we'll say. And so yeah, but other than that, no, it was super uneventful. Killed everything we needed to kill in like the 3 or so hours we've been raiding lately, and left of course Magmarax and Zakarn up because those bosses are awful to do at the end of the night. But got through Neltharin and Sark pretty quickly, and then back cleared. Had a really clean experiments, which is like something that we typically don't have. Surprise like that boss is just generally unfun to kill. I feel like
Yeah,
it's funny. The longer I've done, and maybe it's just because we don't do Zakarn and Magmarax every week, and maybe Zakarn would be up there for me, but like every reclear experiments is the one fight where I'm like, I do not want to do this. Like
yeah.
I don't want to deal with this boss. I don't want to figure out like yeah, but no. Other than that, it was a pretty uneventful raid week. We got I think our final mythic Rashox we needed. We might need one more, loot wise. But yeah, I mean, it's just sort of in clear mode. Like, we got our last mounts actually, so we get to start selling them next week.
Nice.
Which we thought we'd have a little bit longer to sell them, but we get 2 sales in, I guess, 2 weeks to sell them. But yeah, no, not been a bad week, we'll say. Not been a bad- how was yours? How was yours?
A little bit more eventful. Uh,
Oh,
we
ooh,
we had we've been doing sales, but we're selling like the early bosses, right?
okay,
Which I actually kind of highly recommend. It's very chill for the most part. Like
nice.
we had some wipes on Forgotten Experiments, which is like you were mentioning, not really out of the ordinary. The boss is
Yeah,
just kind of messy. Nothing too crazy, like 4 pulls on it or something. Um, Almost one shot Skarn,
nice.
almost. And then spent like 2 hours almost on Neltharion.
Oh, ouch.
And that's
Oh,
just
that's awful. That's such a
that's
bot. Like, yeah.
it's a mix of things, right? It's a mix of this was a mistake. Do not ever do this. If you have working weak cores, do not touch them. Like for a boss like this, do not touch them. So we
Did you
didn't
upgrade
change
the
the weak
map?
cores. We um people were tired of like the thing was like, oh, we get to Neltharion and we do like a 5 minute break and then like another 3 minute break to get all of the everything set up,
Yeah.
and that sucks. And so it was just like, okay, this week we're gonna use like the built-in sort order for the list. Um, Fun fact,
Mhm.
does not include augmentation evoker.
Nice.
But some of our people that joined us after Prague had a patched version that did support augmentation evoker.
Oh, that
So
causes no issue.
yeah. So that was a pain. And then we also, I feel so bad. We had a on like our eighth or ninth pull, right? We put like 20 pulls into this boss, right? Halfway through.
Yeah.
We have a 0.9% wipe. Boss has 6 million HP left.
Ugh.
And I'm playing Blood DK. And for those that aren't familiar with how big the gap is in damage between Blood DK and Brewmaster, the boss would have been dead if I were on my
Oh
monk.
no. Oh no. Oh,
Like
that's rough.
my Brewmaster in phase 3 alone did 4 million more damage to
Oh,
Neltharion than my DK did. And my DK's got like a mythic weapon and everything too. It's
yeah.
like granted I'm not as practiced on Blood DK, so I'm not like getting, top 5 ranks on bosses with it like I am on my monk, but the damage gap is real. So that was a big feels bad. I did end up switching to monk for it just to like make sure we secured that kill.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did not pull Sarkareth because we like that just took long enough that Raid Night was over.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a mix of things, and also just people like you mentioned, people being burned out, and it's definitely clear on our side too. It's like people just are kind of done.
Phoning it in.
Yeah, and if we didn't have this Sarkareth sale that we were committed to, I would actually be in favor of us just like,
this week.
next week, just doing like first 5 or whatever we can sell, and then not doing the rest, and just showing up for like an hour, collecting 3.5 million gold, and just saying, "See you guys in the tree raid."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the tough part. Is it like, and I'm 100% guilty of this, where I'm just like, I'm so phoned in on those fights. Like, I don't change CD timings. Like, we have a new healer. Like I said, like, I'm just like, it's a druid, and like, we'll just drop other classes. So like, where we have spirit link, I'm like, just trank, it'll work out.
That's not
Like,
exactly the same thing.
so it's like, well, I mean, for me, it's just like, I don't have the like, I don't care. It's not that I don't care. Actually, it is kind of, I don't care, but like, I don't want to change anything at this point. I'm like, get me through the next 2 weeks, get me into a new raid where I can have some fun. So
yeah, I definitely feel that.
but I mean, speaking of new raids and new content, I think like you opened the show with like 10.2, we got a release date. So it'll be November 7th, which means if you're listening to this either live or when it launches this week, we got about 2 more raid weeks, and then the patch hits November 7th. So um, it seems a lot quicker. I mean, I guess I realize that like in terms of timing, that's the only date they can make unless they want to do another December date, right? Because any later in November, you run into
Thanksgiving,
US Thanksgiving, and then you have your December stuff. But yeah, it's been a while since we had like an early November raid release, I feel like.
When did this patch start? Hang on, I'm gonna look this up. When is my first Kazara kill?
Was it like Aprilish? May, yeah. I was gonna say April, May time frame.
So that's
like
like
April or May.
Yeah. So patch would have come out like the first week of May. / last week of April. I don't know how that overlaps. And so that the first season, right, of Dragonflight, we went from end of November to beginning of May, basically. So like 6 months there, and then we went from beginning of May to beginning of November, so a little bit less than that. Right around like 5.5 months for that.
Yeah, which is like, it's funny that like we both talked a little about burnout here, because like you typically don't see it. Like I don't see it with people. Like for me, whenever I hear burnout, it's like with people who like I know play the game, I know enjoy it, and like to have them come up and be like, dude, I just don't want to raid, like, or like I'm burned out on this game.
Yeah,
it's weird that it's only been that for like the last 5 months, or it's only been about 5 months, which means like, to be fair with, I mean, we can speculate a little bit with BlizzCon coming up. Like if there's no 10.3, then technically like new expansion in 6-8 months from now, like a summertime expansion, which would make Dragonflight, I think, the shortest expansion at like 18 months at that point, right?
Right,
because we're not even a year into.
Yeah, in a positive sense though, as opposed to like WoD, which is I think the other contender for that title.
Yeah, well, and WoD I think suffers from the fact that like the last raid tier lasted 13 months.
Right. Actually, is TBC the shortest expansion?
I have no idea.
It might be.
I'm guessing at this point, but yeah, I mean, TBC, I think you're right, might be the shortest currently. But if this one only goes 18 months, I think every expansion's been at least 2 years.
Yeah,
it's been at least 24 months. So, But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. So that's not about 10-2, so we'll stick on 10-2. But yeah, I mean, yeah, we got the notice, or like the announcement from Blizzard, so 10.2 coming, and then along with that, the PTR release this week was tagged as a release candidate, or RC release. So typically when we start to see RCs come out, essentially feature complete builds, right? Like there's not going to be any sort of larger scale changes, we'll say, coming up. It'll be a lot of tweaks to things, which is, to be fair, mostly what we've seen this week out of this candidate after this build. But yeah, so we got announcement, release candidate, and we got, you know, some BlizzCon stuff coming up. So it's been a crazy week in terms of like next expansion, which to me is like, I love this time because it's like when I actually start to get excited again about the game. Considering like I've literally spent, you know, I've averaged, you know, my 3.5 hours of retail WoW a week for the past like month.
Yeah.
So now I played a little bit more this week at retail.
I did some keys this week.
I was,
and by some I mean one.
Nice.
And that one was an 18 that I did with some guildies like lobby alts in some pugs, in order to test an add-on.
Nice. I literally, I think it was what, Friday night, or no, Thursday night. I logged in and did a 15, just to like,
just to feel something again.
Yeah, just, you know, just to see if I was still alive inside. But no, it was it's fun, it's exciting. Start to talk about the raid more coming up. So yeah, I'm stoked about this. But cool. I guess in terms of, you know, like we got the release kind of to build, there were a couple of changes, we'll say, that hit in this build. So I'll go over there's, I mean, again, Mistweaver still has some changes. So I'll sort of go over those. Some of these I think we've already talked about, but there's a handful of newish ones that they sort of group together stuff we talked about last week and this week in the notes for this week. So the new stuff is they reduced Expel Harm's healing component in PvP combat only. So it's still a fairly good button to hit. And so they've done just a PvP nerf there. They've also buffed Feline Stomp. So the initial heal and damage has basically been doubled, increased by 100%. So that is a buff to Feline Stomp. So I mean, it's still, I think, a very strong Mythic Plus talent. It doesn't change anything from a raid point of view.
Right.
But yeah, some updates there. And then Bounce Back received some Mistweaver specific changes. It now triggers after receiving 12% of your health and damage. So it was 15, so a 3% reduction, and now it lasts an additional 2 seconds.
I'm jealous of your Bounce Back, honestly. Like, I wish.
I mean, it's weird. Like they've made a couple of changes to like other talents in our class tree to reduce them from like 2 ranks to 1 rank. So like Escape from Reality went to 1 rank, which
I
is
actually
good.
want to mention that real quick. So that actually matters for Brewmaster, because currently the way we're pathing is you go through the cooldown reduction on Touch of Death, but for a lot of fights you don't actually need that, right? You look at something like a Rashok and you can only use it once anyway, so it's useless points. Escape from Reality being a single point node means that you can actually go through that instead, skip the cooldown reduction, and pick up an extra point somewhere. So that does actually have an implication for Brewmaster. That's mostly for pure single target. Like if there's ads that you can Touch of Death, then the cooldown reduction is generally like one of the strongest talents you can take.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
Gotcha. That's nice. Yeah, it works. It helps Mistweaver too. It gives us a couple extra points at the top of the tree, at least the class tree, to move some stuff around. And I think the only other one we didn't talk about last week was Life Cocoon can no longer be canceled, which is weird because the developers' note on this is like, canceling Life Cocoon early was sometimes optimal in order to trigger Nourishing Chi. And it's just like, why don't you change the talent to make it
the one that's
not
causing the
optimal?
problem? Yeah.
Like,
what is Nourishing Chi? Is that the like heal when your Life Cocoon expires?
Yeah, let me just double check. I don't want to get it's either that or it's the reduction. Let me just double check real quick. Nourishing Chi. Where is it?
Is it search box?
Yeah, so it's oh no, so it's basically you receive additional 20% healing over time.
Oh, okay.
And then it lingers for 10 seconds after it's removed. So in certain cases, it was better to just cancel it early to like get the effect or whatever. I don't know.
Why not just change it? Yeah, I don't get that one either. Like, why not just change it so that Nourishing Chi starts when you get Life Cocooned?
Well, it does. So the thing is, though, you don't take any additional. If you're already at max HP, you don't take any
Oh,
additional healing because the
yeah,
absorb is on
okay.
you. So you cancel the absorb, and then you get the additional thing, which procs probably other spells that were good. Not because
Yeah,
it's 20% heal over time, not just for the Mistweaver, but also for anybody healing that
yeah,
target.
okay,
So,
okay.
um, but yeah, so and then there's other changes in these notes, but we've already talked about them, like the Clouded Focus update, and then like the unison nerfs. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, there, it seems like they're. I mean, there's a bunch of other. Well, I guess there's Brewmaster ones too, but
They're all
those
bug
look more like
fixes for our tier
fixes.
set.
Yeah.
They're all
Which
bug
one?
fixes for our tier set. Our tier set's still pretty janky, still pretty weak numerically. Actually to the point that it might be worth not playing the four set if you have other
Oh,
items that are just better items on their own.
okay,
Um,
okay.
don't like take that as Emallson says you should not play the four set. I'm saying that like right now it's pretty weak, and if you have like a low eye level fourth piece and a high eye level other piece that you could put there, maybe it's actually worth doing it. Once you're actually at, eye level cap and you're max eye level on everything, I think it's probably always worth wearing the four set just because it's free value.
Gotcha.
But yeah, week one, when you're staring at that piece that you could roll on, you probably pass it. That normal piece that would complete your four set, I think you give it to somebody else.
Got interesting. Okay, okay. I like that. I like that we're now potentially not wearing force. God, bringing me back to the days when like sometimes two piece was like the way to play the game, which is like, oh, I
Our
love
current
it.
two piece is pretty good.
Oh no. Oh no. We're going back. Um that's crazy. That's wild. But yeah, no, good. I mean, maybe good on the bug fixes. I mean, Mistweaver changes. I think we're still going to be pretty strong going into this tier, so it'll be fun to play. And
Yeah.
then yeah, I don't think there's anything else interesting in the notes. I mean, I guess maybe the only thing that we typically don't talk about, I actually didn't highlight this in our notes, but they did make a couple of changes to macro execution. So I don't know if you read
Yeah.
that section,
People were
which is
talking
like,
about that in Peak this week. Actually, Gnome Sequence Extender
yeah.
is this macro extension add-on that does some very um, suspect things with loops and conditionals that are not supposed to be possible via the macro system. And the macro changes here, I'm not going to get into the technical details, but basically seems like they're fixing some of those.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like you like they're limiting the ability for macros to like change gear through like scripts and through like specific run commands. Um, but yeah, no, it seems like yeah they're trying to rein in macros and what you can actually do with them, which is maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing.
I did
I
play
don't know.
around with Gnome Sequence Enhancer a little bit, trying to. This was actually for my mage, trying to make it use one kind of potion if I was in raid, and a different kind of potion if I was in Mythic Plus. And ended up finding
Oh,
an easier way. There is a macro conditional that's built in that's like, is your group a raid group? And so that's not exactly
okay.
what you want, but it's close enough.
Yeah,
Um, so I ended up using that, but I had to play around with it a little bit for that. I was like, huh, there's some things in here that I didn't think was supposed to be possible with the macro system.
yeah, that's funny. To be fair, that's how I do on my hunter. I use bombs. I have a condition on using bombs and wrath, where it's like if
Yeah,
I'm in a raid group, I'll use a bomb. If I'm not, then I'll just throw a trap. So it's like, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's funny that they're in there. It's not, yeah, it's not exactly right, but it works out
yeah,
90% of the time. So,
yeah,
um, well, cool. I think, and the only other thing we had sort of in this like initial section was just there was a bunch of data mined. I mean, the data mined class changes were on there. So all the monks, all the Mistweaver pieces, were sort of just aligned, to our literal new Mistweaver effect already has 8 effects or 9 effects associated to it. So like we're literally now at what? That's 41 total effects just for Mistweaver, like on the class aura, which is just hilarious. Because like now Bounce Back has like 3 additional entries because they're all Mistweaver specific. But then also surprisingly, it looks like Windwalkers got a 2% damage increase. Their aura went from -5 to -3%. So
Hooray!
On everything, I guess it's good. I don't know. But you know who does know that, Emallson?
Babsalonius?
Babsalonius. And Babsalonius wrote a freaking dissertation on
He had
what's
to
wrong
outdo
with.
me. We had a Brewmaster dissertation this week too.
Nice. Yeah. So
I forgot to put it in our notes.
Yeah, so I didn't realize you had one on Brewmaster, but I pulled up the Windwalker one. I actually read through all of it, which is like for me, I don't care. I've literally never played Windwalker in any serious content in any serious state ever. I think
Yeah.
I played Windwalker in PvP at the start of one expansion because it was easy to hit 2 buttons and win games, and so like that's the extent of my actually playing for real. And I also play it on what's the jumpy boss in the current raid, the doors there, and there's like ads on 2 sides. Whatever the boss you just
Assault of the Zakali, yeah.
Yeah, Assault I play Windwalker on every week. With my 230 or whatever they are, like my 400 item level weapons.
Nice.
But Babylonius put out honestly a really big dissertation on like the state of Windwalker, and it's super interesting to read through. What?
Where did you post this? I don't see it on the site.
It's actually on Wowhead.
Oh.
So he basically went through all the different expansions, the different sort of philosophies they saw, and sort of the issues with the class. But I think is really a good breakdown. It's interesting to me, and actually the most interesting part of this was the philosophy discussion that he starts out with of like each expansion, the class or the spec having like a different philosophy, and then how that's built up over time, basically to like what they have today, which is sort of like something stuck between the philosophy of like always in Windwalker's case of always hitting something different. So basically playing that sort of like mix up style of like never hitting the same ability twice. Yeah. And then also the fact that like you want to hit as many buttons as you can because you have so many resources, right? Like you generate are able to reduce it. So there's like a juxtaposition of like, well, everything's on cooldown but Tiger Palm, and I just hit a Tiger Palm and I can't hit another Tiger Palm, so I guess I just sit here for a second or two and like not do anything.
Babs famously a fan of high downtime specs. So keep that in mind as you read that, because you got to know the man likes having to AFK in between button presses.
Yeah. And I think he does a good job of talking about that about himself, because like you're right, downtime, and then I think the other thing he says, he likes to make decisions, like be able to plan out decisions a couple steps in advance, where like if you have, in the current, I think it feel like in the current DPS meta, this is like the same with almost any class. It's like very much a hit the button that lights up, and the button that lights up is potentially random from time to time, right? And so yeah. But it's a good article. If you're into Windwalkers, I feel like we don't give Windwalkers enough love on this podcast sometimes. But if you're into it, it's a really good read just in terms of like getting, Bab's perspective. I think the thing to keep in mind, Babs is only one person, so it's like his perspective, although he's probably like one of the most well-known and also well-versed, I'd say, guide writers or like writers in general about a spec. So I think he's got a little bit of weight behind it, but yeah, it's a good read about the class kind of being stuck in 2 mindsets, which I can feel. I'm not as good with words, but I can definitely feel that with like Mistweaver, at least in terms of like how they've basically set up the class and like how they've set up a lot of the abilities since Legion. I think it was pretty clear, in MOP and WAD, but since Legion, I think Mistweaver's been a little bit at a loss in terms of direction, although it's been getting better, we'll say, as at least Dragonflight's gone on. So
yeah. It's very interesting, the kind of like idea of procs being an issue where like you just push the button, lights up and stuff like that. Because Brewmaster and Blood DK, which are both the things that I've made this expansion, are just not like that at all. 0 procs, basically. Like Blood DK has a proc where you get an extra charge of Death and Decay.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's the only proc.
That's an easy one to
Everything
manage.
else is like you can plan ahead, and you actually do because you're planning around like cooldown reduction on vampiric blood for defenses, and planning around cooldown reduction on dancing rune weapon both defensively and because it's one of your main like throughput buttons for
Yeah.
damage. And so you do things like you can slam a marrow rend at the end of your dancing rune weapon window, and then you only have to marrow rend's like not a great button for damage, but that means you only
Hmm.
have to push one in between getting this the end of this dancing rune weapon and the beginning of the next one, which will
Oh,
refresh your bone
okay.
shield stacks. So like stuff like that where you can like all play that in like Brewmaster right now, zero procs,
Hmm.
none, just absolutely none. You have too many buttons for the number of GCDs that you have, and so there's constantly like a but then again, all the buttons, well, most of the buttons do different things. And so
Hmm.
you're on a single target boss like Rashok, it's pretty linear, it's pretty straightforward. But then when you have something where there's different things happening at different times, like Sarkareth, you're sometimes faced with, well, like normally I would push Rising Sun Kick here, but maybe it's correct for me to push Keg Smash instead
Hmm.
because there are ads active, right? And so
Yeah.
you switch up your priority based on what's happening in the fight, and so there's things happening with that, but it's again like no procs. It's very
Straightforward. Yeah.
fixed.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think there's pros and cons. I think that each type of, we'll say, rotation, like each type of implementation of a spec. So,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, no, it's a look, guys. If you're gonna read this, set aside like maybe 30 minutes
yeah,
to get through it all. It's not War and Peace levels of long, but I mean it's like maybe the first half of the Lord of the Rings, you know. So
yeah. Actually, speaking of dissertations, we also have one up for Brewmasters on Peak. It's
oh,
going
nice.
over what stats do on a like technical level and
Oh, very cool.
how that works out in terms of like what stats you want
Hmm. Hmm.
and why critical strike and versatility have been like our go-to stats for raid and mythic plus for like several expansions running. And this was actually brought on by the fact that some people were observing mastery becoming their top simming stat in their sims,
Yeah.
and basically getting to the root of why that happens sometimes, why it is still consistent with like the crit versus best status quo.
Uh-huh.
And that basically boils down to when you have less of your damage coming from procs on items or special effects on items like the Rashok weapon or Beacon to the Beyond and Dragonfire Bomb Dispenser,
Hmm.
then if you remove those, Mastery actually is just like a more efficient stat. It has a higher, like you get more percent stat bonus per point of rating on your gear than you do from versatility. So it ends up being better than versatility when you
Oh,
remove those
okay.
other things that don't scale off of mastery.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Nice.
yeah,
Nice. Cool. Yeah, I didn't even realize it was up here. I'll read through that.
yeah, it went up in brew notes, so that's why you didn't see it.
Nice. Yeah, no, I don't hang out there at all. Whew. Yikes. Um
Anyway, yeah,
so what were we talking about? We're talking about raid
we were gonna get into
updates.
the raid stuff, yeah,
Yeah. So
which
there's been some, oh, sorry.
probably good. Like we've got in the notes here talking about the private auras. Maybe also good to touch on the updates. Like we got extra heroic testing this week, so
Yeah.
maybe lump those things together.
Yeah, sure. So I think so first up, private auras wise, Blizzard has basically updated, I think they said 12 this week, 10 or 12 new abilities have been added to private auras. So I think that now brings the total up to, according to the Wowhead article, to 20. Oh, sorry, and it's 12 are directly related to Rack, which scares the ever living hell out of me. Because like I don't want to know anything about this. But yeah, no. So private auras are sort of, we talked about these a while ago. They're essentially just auras that provide no additional information into the UI, or sorry, into the game, other than that you have it or you don't have it. So there's not really much to go on. You can't know timings. You can't know
No
you know
assignment
who
week or
yeah,
is the big thing.
essentially. Yeah, no assignment week or stuff like that. So, so yeah, it's kind of stinks, but no, it's sort of they're expanding the use of the system. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, Fyrak with 12 of the 20, just God, I hope they change that before the end of it.
Well, I hope they designed the mechanics around it. Unlike Neltharion, where like, I mean, I guess technically they probably tried to design it around it and they failed,
That's
right?
true. That is true.
Um, like so Nimue. Speaking of Nimue, Nimue has one of the new private auras. It's this thing called Weaver's Burden, and this is this. So all right, Nimue has been redone.
Mhm.
Nimue is different now. It's still got the walls mechanics. I've got like fucking 1,500 words on the forums giving feedback for the heroic test of this boss that we did on Friday.
Nice.
It needs more help. It is better than it was, but oh boy, it needs more help. This they need to find whoever it was that did the Halandros rebuild, and they need to get him to do this boss. This boss needs help. Um, so yeah, like the core conceit of the fight is still that you've got these walls, and the challenge of the fight is supposed to be like managing crossing the walls with dealing the other mechanics. Like there's now flowers that spawn throughout the arena periodically, and they just like give a stacking raid wide dot for as long like. If you have 8 actives, you have 8 stacks of the dot. You clear a flower, there's 7 stacks of the dot on everybody.
Gotcha.
So it's just like you need to be moving through the walls in order to remove these flowers, and you just remove them by soaking them, right? They're just like a puddle that you stand in and it goes away when you've soaked it enough. Um, except the walls don't matter, so you just ignore the walls and soak the flowers.
So funny.
um,
That's so awesome.
there's this fight has a bunch of visual issues too right now, where like everything is the same shade of light green.
I love that. I love that.
Um,
So hold up. Speaking of that, something that I found actually rating in Wrath. This is an interesting thing. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but maybe this is where we use a weak or to change the colorblind mode. So
yeah,
specifically on Lady Death Whisper, people have been using a specific colorblind mode to change it so you can see like she has like an AoE on the ground and it sort
yeah,
of matches the floor color.
yeah.
So maybe we start doing that. Maybe that's the new weak aura craze. Sorry, it's
Yeah,
so
I
sorry.
mean that sounds great, except for the fact that all of the mechanics are the same color. So like you can tell them
Oh
apart from
god.
the ground, but you can't tell them apart from each other. And changing a colorblind mode is not really gonna fix it.
Nope, not gonna help at all. Cool. That's okay. Cool. Idea over. Sorry. I'll let you
We did
continue.
like Jaina had a weak car like that, if you remember, for the intermission phase.
Yeah, just turn down spell effects. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so yeah, there's like these stun lines now that come out from the boss. The boss is stationary at one edge of the arena, and these stun lines come out from the boss. Again, same exact color as the walls and the flowers. Uh, and there are now these knockback flowers that go out. One goes on the tank, and at the same time, on heroic and above, like 2 or 3 others go out. And that's what the private aura is these knockback flowers. Except that
Okay.
you don't need most of the arena. So you just like take them out and drop them. Like so this private aura basically doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like you can get your like sound notification when you get the debuff through the private aura system that exists, but other than that, it just doesn't matter. You would never assign this as it stands right now. The fight has a bunch of structural issues. The pacing is still kind of off. The stun lines suck. The visuals are a mess, and the core mechanic that's like the core load bearing mechanic of the walls is just completely irrelevant for most of the fight. And then there's supposed to be
Nice.
this thing that you get called inflorescence that makes you immune to damage from the walls, so you can walk through them without issue. Except it is
Mhm.
very buggy and doesn't work reliably, so you can run through the wall with it and still get damaged and still get the dot stack that it puts on you. So
Oh,
it's got implementation issues, some of which like fixing inflorescence would be nice, but it ultimately doesn't matter right now because you just like you have to work really hard to die to the walls. Really hard to die to the walls. Like I think at one point we were moving like in the intermission, 2 treants spawn, And so you have half of the raid go to one, half of the raid go to the other. You kill them both. You go back into the main phase, and the I went to 17 stacks of the wall dot, crossing from one side to the other, and lived. Granted, I'm a tank, right? But that kind of tells you how irrelevant this dot that it's giving right now is. That I could go to 17 stacks and live.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. It's it's the fight's a mess. The other fight that we tested this week is Laradar that also has some private auras, and Laradar's fine. Laradar's a good fight. We kill it on heroic, which now brings the total number of bosses that I've killed on PTR on this raid up to 5 of 9 heroic.
Oh, nice. Look at you.
So yeah, feeling good about that week 1 AOTC. We'll see what Farak is like, or Fyrak, or whatever, however you say it.
whatever that thing's name is. Nice. That's awesome. Well, good. I mean, sucks that they're still having structural issues with the boss fight, but
yeah,
they still have a couple weeks to fix it, right? That'll be
and I kind of feel like it's overreaching at this point. Where like one of the other conceits of the fight is that every time you go through the intermission, the phase gets faster. It's supposed to be like more stuff spawns, stuff goes faster. And it feels like maybe the pacing issues are just a product of the fact that it's designed around it getting faster. So like the pacing feels fine at the end of the fight, but because it
has to reach there,
like the first like 5 minutes of the fight feel really slow and boring. And that just like maybe just don't make it faster. Maybe just make it fast from the get-go, and it's just 5 minutes of insanity, and then you're done.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll see once they get. We'll see. I mean, we'll see the final fight in a couple weeks. So
yeah,
I don't think they'll do any more raid testing now. We've got a release candidate. Typically, they
doubt it. Yeah.
Unless I feel like we've only done it once or twice, and it's been for like I think like Halandris might have been. Did they ever retest that fight, or did they make all the changes then go? Yeah, I was trying to think. I think they've only done maybe one fight where they've done a larger rework towards the end and
Council of Blood. Council of Blood.
Oh right, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, it was never good on PTR. It still wasn't great on live, but it was different on live from the last tested PTR version. And yeah, that one, it was the way that people did it on Mythic sucked. The fight itself ended up being fine on Heroic, I think. And I think the Laradar test this week was purely a bug testing one. Like, purely bug testing. Because, like, it was basically exactly the same as what we did on Mythic. Just with, like, the Mythic mechanics taken out.
Nice. Well, cool. That's awesome. So a little bit, hopefully maybe last raid test before we get into the actual raid. Of course, Fyrak not yet tested, so we'll get to all see that together.
Yeah.
I guess the only other thing just raiding related is Blizzard released the LFR release schedule, which granted we don't talk too much about LFR, but it looks like if you are an LFR raider, you get the final tier unlocked a week early. It'll be released. Final wing is released December 12th, which is it's weird. The Wowhead article says 4 weeks, but I think that's 5 weeks after. It's like week 5. Because it's basically every wing. Oh no, you're right. Yeah, well no, it's right. Yeah, 14th, 21st, 28th, basically wings 1 through 3, the first 3 weeks. Then there's a break December 5th and then December 12th, the final.
Yeah. So normally it's like every 2 weeks there's an LFR wing. And
exactly
starting on the second week of the tier. Now it's first week of the tier, it opens up, and then the next 2 weeks another ring opens up each time, and then 2 weeks after that the final one opens with the last 2 bosses. Including the dragon riding boss, which I can't wait to see what people's reaction to LFR dragon riding.
That's gonna be
LFR dragon riding boss is.
I might actually raid LFR that wing that week just to hang out for like an hour or two. See what's going on.
I cannot wait for people to be like, I haven't actually unlocked my dragon riding. What do I do?
I have no idea what this does. Woo!
Like the Heart of Azeroth problem when we got to N'Zoth LFR. Where people were queuing in and didn't have the Heart of Azeroth and would just get instantly mind controlled on pull.
Yeah, because God, I forgot about that. That's so good.
Oh man. More kind of like raid adjacent stuff though. We have more loot updates, both crafting stuff, which we'll get to in a minute. And then actually, you know what? Let's just talk about crafting stuff now because it's pretty quick,
It's
right?
short. Yeah, it's short.
So they've buffed the item level of crafted items. So for those like familiar with this tier, crafted items go up to 447, which is the normal mythic item level cap. They had nerfed that for next tier basically, so the max eye level of crafted items was like 6 below the peak of mythic, no, 3 below peak of mythic. I have it pulled up right now. And now they once again match the maximum mythic eye level, I believe. No, what 3 less than the max, because 489 is the max. They go to 486. So part of this I think was maybe motivated by the fact that people were talking about just not using embellished items or only using embellishments that could go in low budget slots like bracers, belts, things like that, or rings where like getting perfect stats on your rings is like really important.
Exactly.
So now they're better for mythic raiders. They're still worse than what you can get from raid in a technical sense, but 3 eye levels is small enough that like you'll use a lot of these for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other issue is that like because embellishments are not impactful at all, that like yeah, you could get away with just not running them,
Right.
which is maybe what they're looking at. Yeah. So yeah, so they've updated that, so 3 additional item level on the crafting gear, which is good, and they've also then in turn increased the crest costs for actually getting the crest to craft items, basically. So like for your aspect ones, which are your top level ones, I believe, it went from 45 to 60. So it looks like basically a 15 crest increase across the board for all 3 levels. So yeah, more item level, but more crests to collect. And I think just so that I think from just an acquisition perspective, doing a what is it, like a 19 or a 20 nets you 12 aspect crests.
Right.
So you typically you'll get about 12 out of each thing. So
the
one and a little extra.
The weekly cap as well is 90 crests. So this takes it from being there's a really important breakpoint here that it takes it from 2 enchanted aspect crests on the first week to 1 and 1 on the second week.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, which is huge. So you're not going to be crafting 2 items week 1. Just actually, you can. You're not going to craft 2 max level items.
Yeah. How do sparks work this tier? I actually don't know if I ever heard. Is it just like this tier?
Oh yeah, I think it's just like this tier where you just get a half of one every week. But so I guess it doesn't really matter. You just to bank a couple more.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I mean, crafting update, good, bad, and different. Just a minor sort of change there. But I think the larger update we got this week was actually on the loot dropping side.
Yes.
So Blizzard made 2, I'll say, key updates in the way loot drops. Maybe we'll start with tier stuff first, and we can talk about very rare items. So tier basically will now drop at a 1 to 3 rate.
Yep.
Which basically essentially almost I guess would half a lot of the tier set drop rates as we currently see them, depending on raid size. So in like your 20 man raid, you were potentially getting 2 tier set drops. Now you're only going to get 1, which means you'll now get an additional non-tier loot piece. So still 4 drops out of a 20 man. 1 will be tier, 3 will be non-tier, which is different than the 2-2 split, which I'm all for. I mean, they're dropping Catalyst week 1 this week or this time around. So I mean, I don't think this slows down tier acquisition at all. Also, I literally have gotten 2 pieces of tier gear in every vault for the past like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And so like, come on, Blizzard. Like, what's going on here, boys?
This is if you compare it to where things were on PTR, yes, it is a reduction. But compared to where Aberrus was, it is an improvement. It is the same rate on average, but it's actually lower variance. It means that like before, actually I think it's a buff from Aberrus still because we get the 2 guaranteed week 1. Yeah, it's a buff. It ends up also being lower variance than what you would have before. So it's like you're gonna more consistently get the items that you wanted. This also means that like trinkets and things are going to be more accessible earlier on. So you're gonna, think of something like Rashok. Rashok's a tier boss. Uh, or Forgotten Experiments, also a tier boss, also with a trinket that people really wanted. And both of those now can drop an extra item that could be a second trinket or a first trinket uh, immediately.
Right. Yeah, which is good, particularly for like because I think even nowadays, like I get every token now just because, well, for the ones in like my
Tertiaries.
class, well, not even tertiary, it's just to DE them.
Oh
Like
yeah,
like it's just we don't even ask anymore. It's like everyone has like their 450s if they need them, or
yeah,
whatever 447s if that's the max. So yeah, I mean it's sort of a wasted loot spot, but like we could definitely use some more bomb trinkets, some more
yeah.
beacons, right? So it's like it's nice to see, that we'll get more non-tier loot as we go forward, which I think is helpful not only initially, but then also just from a long-term perspective with the raid. Um, but yeah, then on top of this, they've also made a clarification or made a change to the way very rare items will drop. So previously, if you guys aren't aware, but the very rare items like the one in
Neltharion
the
Trinket,
Whispering,
Rashok
and
Polearm, Sarkareth Cloak, Whispering Incarnate Icon, Aranog Ring, like those items.
yeah, that is known as very rare. They used to actually take up a loot slot. So like you would basically have to, as when something dropped, not only like roll that you get a very rare item, but then see that item, of course, and it would take away another piece of loot, another slot of loot. And so what they've said is basically that like these very rare items will drop in addition, basically be off the like item replacement table for that boss, right? And so like we just talked about loot drops. Like if you're in a 20-man raid, you potentially get 5 items, right? You'll get 4 normal, one
Yeah,
tier, 3 non-tier, and then a very rare item could drop also in a chance, which is I think really good change. Um, I think sometimes we like some of those very rare items didn't seem very rare because I think we saw an Aranog rig like every week at one point, or
yeah.
like we saw like a
It's
string of just like every time we killed it, we saw the ring.
that's
But
yeah. The one of the notes, the dev notes for this is that there are one of the goals is to make the very rare items consistent in rarity. And so you mentioned like Aranog Ring dropping just all of the time, right? Uh
mhm.
Aranog's loot drops. God, this is hang on. Let me see if I can filter these right. I'm pretty sure Aranog is like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 items that it can drop.
Mhm.
Including the ring. So it's got 9 total items that they can drop. Uh, Rashok, in comparison, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plus tier. So when you have 2 tier items, right, that
Mhm.
are guaranteed to take up slots, that was part of the problem. Um, but even with 1 tier item, you have like 8 items for 3 slots versus 9 items for 4 slots. It ends up being that Jarun was rarer than the Aranog ring, even though on paper they should both have the same rarity because they're both just very rare. I think
Right, right,
Neltharion is
right.
a more extreme example of this, but I don't have the loot table that pulled up.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think in general, it's a good change to sort of have this out on its own, or have these very rare items out on their own. Like you mentioned, more consistent drop rates, and then also just not chewing up other loot that you potentially could still use as these start to drop. So
Yeah,
but yeah, no, I think both these changes, both in terms of like changing the number of tier sets that drop on a boss, is good. With the fact that there's, like you mentioned, we still have the Omni, like the overall Omni tokens from the last boss. We're still going to get Omni tokens for getting AOTC, like your own personal one for the achievement, and the fact that Catalyst is week 1. Yeah, I think there's ample chances to get your tier sets that
yeah,
we don't need them to take up more spots on bosses because some of the other items will be better. And then similarly with this very rare item stuff, I think it'll be more helpful because like you won't see like a guild like ours where I think
right,
we had a bunch of Aranard rings and almost 0 icons like out
right.
of like the first tier this expansion. So um but no, I think, I mean, all around we're getting close to the new raid.
Yeah. So I want to like really briefly talk about the implications of this tier stuff for like week one. For if you're
Mhm.
not doing splits, which don't do splits. Nobody wants to do splits.
It's a bit much. It's a bit much.
Um, so before the discussion had been that like, oh, you can get everybody four piece basically week one, like almost everybody. We could get everybody except for like it would be like tanks and people that don't have a very good four piece basically would be skipping their four piece, like 4 or 5 people,
Hmm.
depending on exactly how many tier pieces dropped. Uh, but there's actually a little bit of extra stuff that goes into this calculus because you want to have some of these items already figured out before you get your guaranteed token from killing Farak. Because
Hmm.
you want to have your 2 sets probably for Farak, and you want to have some of the 4 sets for that. AOTC week one is not a joke. Uh,
Yeah.
it's worth taking seriously. So what you're looking at uh, if you get 2 Farak, you're standing in front of heroic Farak, you've not pulled it yet. What are the items that you have? Well, for our raid size, we're going to have around 25 people in the raid, 25, 26. We're going to be looking at around 15 tier items that dropped, plus everybody being able to catalyst probably a heroic item level piece. And the question is, how many sets can you get, basically? And the answer is basically you can make 15 2 sets. Then everybody gets their guaranteed one from killing Farak. And most of those people, like those 15 people, get 3 sets. Everybody else gets their 2 set.
Hmm.
And there's potentially a couple people that we actually set up for 4 sets before Farak, although I don't know that we're going to do that. It would be like giving normal items to those people so they can spend their guaranteed heroic Omni token
Uh-huh.
on replacing a normal piece. So it's not completely wasted. Certain specs like BM Hunter currently have extremely strong 4 piece bonuses. And so it's potentially worth like halfway wasting a tier item to give it to them. But what that does, like going back to the stuff I was talking about with Sepulcher when we got tier sets back with personal
Hmm.
loot, a lot of what you're doing, if you're not doing splits for this stuff, is you're trying to make sure that your items from the Great Vault don't go to waste.
Right.
And so the ideal scenario is that everybody in your raid at the end of week one has 3 set. And then a bunch of those people get 4 set from the vault, and the rest get 4 set from running heroic again. And that's
Right.
the
Yeah.
ideal scenario. You're not really going to quite get there with this reduction of the tier set bonus or the tier set drops from raid. You're going to
Yeah.
get like, in our case, around half, a little bit more than half of the raid with 3 set after killing heroic Farak. Um, and that's pretty good. That basically means that you can get the majority of the raid 4 set on week two.
Hmm.
That's kind of like before we were talking majority of the raid 4 set on week one, last few people get it week two. Now it's majority of the raid gets it week two. A few stragglers just pick it up from the catalyst before raid week three.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what the implication is right now. You're still looking at like a lot of the raid having 4 set or not 4 set, sorry, 2 set before you pull the heroic end boss, which is good.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think it seems like they're accelerating a lot with this last patch in terms of like gear acquisition and
Yeah,
just like yeah, with the changes they've made, which I don't. I mean, in terms of the way that the current player base, I think, plays retail WoW, it's good. Like for
yeah,
me, it's super not enjoyable. But like, I'm also I'm in Wrath mode right now, where like the way they do Wrath sets in ICC, they changed this, where like you basically have to buy your sets with badges,
yeah,
like basically like Frost badges they call them, and you get those badges by either killing raid bosses or like doing a daily quest or 2 daily quests, basically.
yeah,
Um, and so like, and it's a very set acquisition. Like each piece costs a set number of badges. You can only get a set number of badges for the course of the week. So you know exactly when you'll get your 2 and 4 sets, right?
yeah.
Unless you get lucky with a drop from another boss. But anyway, from a badge perspective how to do it. Love that. Very methodical, very like just do that daily every
I
day,
mean, we're
make
kind
progress towards a
of
number.
we're we're kind of there right now. Like you as a Mistweaver, right? I know your set's really good, but if it weren't, right, and you were
Yeah.
like bottom of the list for a tier set, right, you only need one item from raid in order to get your tier set on week 3, right?
That is true. Yeah.
Because you get your 2 catalyst charges, one on week 1, one on week 3. Get your guaranteed Omni token. That's three pieces, and they can all be heroic.
Right.
And then you get your fourth just from, you just need any tier set. It can come from the vault. It can come from raid. You just need a tier set item.
That is true. But like, yeah, I like. Not gonna lie, like when numbers go up, Emallson. We've talked about this, and there's a little frost badge number that goes up, and I get to spend them.
Yeah,
and that's fun.
That's valid. That's valid.
No,
the current system does not give you numbers go up.
No, but and all I'm saying is like it's just very quick, right? Like the frost badges are like you can get up to 100 a week, and you need 95 to buy a helm, and so like there's like you're only getting 1 to 2 items a week, so it's just a slower game, which it's fine. Retail is what it is. Don't have to go down that pathway. But yeah, no, I mean these loot changes I think hopefully eliminate. To be fair, I think this also helps, like you mentioned, being able to like only need 1 raid drop to make your 4 set. This is super helpful for like PvP players, right?
Yeah.
Which means like even if they get 0 raid drops, that means by week, what is it, 3, 5, they'll have their 4 set.
Week 5 it's guaranteed, but like you think about it, they have like 2 vaults of just PvP slots to pick up a single tier piece. And if you're doing PvP, you're getting your triple vault from that. You don't even have to do Mythic Plus or Raid. You can just like get it from Vault and have it on week 3. And like maybe you get super unlucky and you get it week 5, right? But that's still better than it was before. Where like before, Creation Catalyst didn't open until week 8.
Yeah.
And so you could potentially be looking at like week 8 finishing your tier set.
Yeah. Or if you're extremely unlucky, maybe starting it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, which is a problem. So no, yeah. So I mean I think it's a solid change, but yeah, we'll see. I think as always I say, like we'll see how this plays out in the raid. I think though I'm excited for the loot changes. I think this will just be in general good for the game. But it feels, to me, it feels like an end of expansion change. That's the only thing. Like it feels like does this acceleration help? Because like we want to get more gear into more people faster, so there's not like a long build up to like 10-3.
I do wonder actually, so this is the last bit and then we're gonna wrap up the episode because we're running out of time. But I do wonder, you mentioned how short these tiers were being at the beginning of the episode. I wonder if that's just the plan. If they're like, listen, this old formula worked better when we had 8-month-long tiers, and now that we're at 5-month-long tiers, we really don't. People aren't getting to play with these things. We want to give them the things sooner because they're not going to have as much time in the current tier to use them.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it mimics the Shadowmourne issue like that they did where they basically sped up Shadowmourne acquisition in Wrath Classic. Yeah, that could be the other thing. Yeah, because now we only have, instead of, you're right, 8 months of gearing up for the next tier, we have 5 months, right?
Right.
And so it's like, let's get this stuff in people's hands so they get, a couple raid weeks to play with it and then move on. So yeah, that's interesting. That's a good point. That's a good point. So
yeah. All right. I think that is gonna bring today's episode to a close. Sorry for the technical issues in between. It will be fixed in post, I swear. But that is gonna be it for the show today. Thank you all for watching and or listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, you can support it and the other work that we do, like that big Brewmaster post on stats
Baller.
over on our Patreon at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. And of course, come and join the Discord. It is the best place to come and ask us questions that result in 4,000 word long blog posts.
Exactly.
And to keep up with the current state of the bugs in the Brewmaster tier set, and also the fact that Mistweaver is changing every 5 minutes.
Every week.
Every week. Yeah, that is going to be it for the show today. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye. Confirm that. Yeah, I mean, well, you're also running up against BlizzCon too, right? Which I'm assuming the week of BlizzCon is like maybe not a dead week in the office, but like they're getting ready for whatever demos and stuff they have set
Right.
up. So it's
And
like
we don't know what they're going to be demoing at BlizzCon, right? Like it could
no, we
be
do
we do.
11.0.
Oh, you do?
11.0, maybe some Classic Plus announcements, maybe
See,
the Kata.
classic is definitely for sure. We're getting some kind of announcement there. Like
Yeah,
because ICC is out. Like what people have to know what comes next, and it can't just be Ruby Sanctum, right?
yeah. No, they've already got a plan for Ruby. No, it's so my prediction. I actually don't know this for certain. Well, I know maybe some of this for certain, but I won't tell you exactly what it is. But my predictions are there'll be a new season of the Mastery, so new like classic, whatever they call like classic plus stuff, like
Yeah.
the 1.0 game. Um, they're gonna announce Cataclysm Classic, of course. Um, and then of course 11.0 coming. We'll know the name of whatever this new expansion is. And this is my outlier, which maybe we should say this for the episode, but my outlier here in terms of predictions is I think we're gonna get a weird new progression type server that basically just replays the classic BC Wrath loop. Meaning that like you
Yeah, I can see
basically
that.
it's not necessarily like Classic Plus, which I think is what they've data mined some stuff or some new CDN stuff has come up for that. But I think it's almost like a, hey, every like 2 year, we're gonna loop this every 2 years, or whatever it is, and have like a very set schedule.
2 years almost seems too short for that. Like I almost feel
Yeah,
like it
maybe it's
should be
longer. Yeah,
like a 3 year cycle, and it's like a year per expansion. Because if you look at the number of like, I mean, raid tiers in classic maybe not the greatest reference point, but like in BC, right? You've got your first tier is you got your like tier your first half tier, then you've got the first
yeah,
full tier, then you got like Black Temple, then you've got Sunwell Plateau, and if you're packing all of that into like six
that's
months,
true.
it's a
Yeah,
pretty
it's a lot.
aggressive schedule.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But no, yeah, I mean, I think we see something like that, um, which would be cool.
Yeah.
I don't think we. Some people have been saying like well, maybe we should get in the episode, but yeah, maybe that like
Well,
maybe that we can talk about this next
I'll
week.
give you a hint. I'm cutting and pasting this bit. This bit's going at the end after the outro on the audio
Gotcha.
version. I don't know if I'm gonna bother editing the YouTube one, but maybe. Maybe I'll do
Nice.
like YouTube has a built-in editor that you can do some basic stuff with. And I think that includes like very
Cut and copy.
basic cut paste
Nice. Yeah,
and simple fade transitions. So that might be a thing.
that'd be cool. But yeah,
Might
those
be a
are my
thing.
those are my major predictions because I think that loop would be fun for people that enjoy
I
the
think that
old
loop
game.
would be cool. I would
Yeah,
enjoy that.
yeah.